get the stream going. We're live. We're live on Mixcloud. This is volume 5, I think. Maybe it's 6, actually. I can't even remember. Anyways, today we got in the building Moistbreezy. So without further ado, take it away.
Is this real or still a dream? Give me wanted something I had not foreseen. Glimmerings could be undone. It's physical if I believe. Love is your imagination. Whoa. Love is your imagination. I release my inhibitions. Stuck on you through intuition. You become my new addiction. Yeah, 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 yeah. Is this real or is this your imagination? What is truth and what is fiction? Is it love or superstition? Let me be your new religion. Yeah, 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 yeah. Is this real or is this your imagination? Real or still a dream? Pull me into the fantasy. Spiritually set me free. It's physical if I believe. Is this real or still a dream? Pull me into the fantasy. Spiritually set me free. It's physical if I believe. Love is pure imagination. Whoa. Love is pure imagination. Whoa. Ooh. You're just a traveler, here to see the sights and a quick hello. You're just a visitor who crossed my path, but I'm sad to see you go. And I know I can't hold on to a bird that's meant to roam, but I'll miss you when you're gone. Why'd you leave me so alone? Why'd you leave me so alone? So alone, so alone. If you ask me, I'd take flight to your ocean view. 'Cause your smile is paradise. You could make it through, make it through, make it through, make it through, make it through. I'm just a missioner here to spread the light of your afterglow. Make me a minister, I'll gospel on, play a song on stereo. How you love it set me free. When I lost my way, like you come to rescue me. If I ask you, would you stay? Would you stay? Would you stay? Would you stay? If you ask me, I'd take flight to your ocean view. 'Cause your smile is paradise. You could make it through, make it through, make it through, make it through, make it through. I'm holding on, holding on, holding on. I'm holding on, holding on, holding on. Can't forget you, can't forget you.
All right, give it up for Moistbreezy, everyone. Woo! All right, we are gonna chat a little bit as we do here on the artist series. So, yeah, first off, I just wanted to ask, talk about just where the Moistbreezy project came from. I mean, was this your first formal project? I'm assuming you've been making music for a while, but like, was this your first venture? How did it come about?
Yeah, so this is technically my first real project in music.
Do you want to keep the echo on?
Yeah, I just realized I'm like plugged into this.
Sounds good. We can keep the echo going for the interview. Like, won't mind.
Maybe something a little less. How is this one? This one's
There
a
we
little bit
go.
more normal.
There we go.
It was a little distracting for me. I was getting lost in it. But yeah, so Moistbreezy is technically my first real project in music. It all kind of happened accidentally, I guess, starting with the name. So when I was in college, I went to NYU. I was studying film actually, and I had a friend who was producing beats. He did like electro house type stuff at the time, and he found this musical I wrote in high school on my computer. Not something that was really like meant for people. It was for a class project, but he wanted to get me to do vocals for his project, and I would just troll him with these vulgar raps that were really unserious. I would be like drunk and write him like a rap that was really not what he was asking for, and he's like, "Oh, you need a terrible name for this rap project. You should go by Moist Princess." I was like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll be Moist Princess." And I put one of these raps on SoundCloud, and someone was like, trolling real hard, keep it real, moist breezy. I was like, wait, moist breezy is even better. So I just made that my name on like Instagram and SoundCloud and all of that. And when I started trying to learn how to produce myself, I just threw something on SoundCloud. And I had some friends who were DJs who were kind of coming up at the time, and they were like, oh damn, this is like kind of good for your first real attempt at production.
Yeah.
Let's repost it. And I got like 1,000 plays in one day. I was like,
Oh,
I have
yeah.
a music career.
Oh yeah. Came from just a joke. Like,
Yeah, so yeah, it started as a joke.
That's great. No, I really appreciate that because I read that in one of your interviews about how the name came about. And as someone who also like made their like creative name just as like a stupid drunk joke one time, like Young Warhol was just like a dumb idea I had in like 2015 that I just was like, I'm gonna be really insufferable and make that my Instagram name. And that's just been my like creative moniker since. So I do really appreciate someone else, like making their serious creative name just like a stupid inside joke. But hell yeah. So yeah, so you said, this has been a couple years in the making now. So like, we'll talk a bit about like what kind of what did you set out to do with like the Moist Breezy project? Like, was there like a specific sound you wanted to make with it? Once you were like, okay, I actually like, messing around with this. Like, I want to seriously make some music. Yeah, like, what did you set out to make a certain sound, or did you just sort of like it come together, experimenting? Talk about it.
Yeah, well, at first I didn't, like way back when in like 2014, 2015, I didn't have a plan with what I was doing. I was just trying to learn production. And at the time, I was really influenced by, I had just discovered PC Music and Sophie and Nightcore. And that was really influential to me learning at the time. But then I found Unicorn Kids project, which I was like, Unicorn Kid at the time had stopped making music. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I was really digging like the C-punk thing. So I thought I would lean more into that. But even like for a few years, I was just trying out different things. I think with my first mixtape, Breezy, that's what I consider like the real start of my project. Because at that
was
point,
2020, right?
Yeah, so that came out in 2020. But I'd been trying to work on a mixtape for like 3 years before that came out. And there was this whole like mixtape and a half that I scrapped before coming to what Breezy was. But yeah, that was like at that point I felt confident enough in production that I was like, I can say what I want to say. Thought a lot about what I wanted my voice to be, because I had like years of like experimenting with stuff. So I was kind of going back to some things I'd tried out.
This is a pizza restaurant, of course. Which you're all welcome to get pizza and stuff while we're here. But continue.
Yeah, so I like there'd been a few. I started producing at the end of 2014. Like that's when I was seriously trying to produce. So there was a good few years that I was experimenting with different stuff, and I kind of went back to some ideas I had been working on in 2015 sound-wise, and just doing a more updated, more polished version of that lane where it was dance influenced, but also poppy, very euphoric. But for that project, I had a very specific thesis in mind that was like supposed to be more than just that project of like, oh, what type of music do I want to put out in the world? I was someone who was really into dystopic stuff, but I think I was seeing how you couldn't really tell the difference between dystopic art and real life anymore. I was like, oh, I kind of want to make something that's a fantasy, that's hopeful. And I like that it was really important to me that was like my thesis for what I was doing, was trying to bring something that was light into the world.
Light and breezy,
yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you that later, but we can get into that now. Yeah, I mean, that's like definitely like the main thing like I first noticed when I like discovered your work was like, yeah, I mean, it's just, there's very much a world built around it. And as like someone who, that's kind of my approach to art as well. I mean, I don't make music, I make clothes and stuff, but like, yeah, with each season, it's like, I want to tell a story. And yeah, I'd done like sort of stuff like a take on what was going on. And then I was like, the world is so fucking depressing. I don't even really want to comment on that. I kind of want to do just like make a fantasy thing. And that's where a lot of like my recent seasons have come in. So yeah, I mean, I think it's like really, that was going to be one of my next questions, but we can talk about it now. Like, yeah, talk about how sort of the whole like world building came around, because obviously like the visuals are such a huge part of it, and as you said, like you came into it with like a really specific idea of like, yeah, not just, oh, I want to make, you know, kind of dance inspired music, but like I have a specific whole world that I want to build. So yeah, talk about how that came about. I mean, like you said, years of experimenting, but yeah, just sort of talk about the visuals and the whole overarching theme behind it.
So I realized that's essentially how I operate as an artist, or just in general. Like I've always, both in terms of how I tend to view the world and the art that I like I really love world building artists who they're like with musicians, where you know exactly where their world lives, and when you listen to it, you enter that world. Like Lana Del Rey, I think is like a great example of that. Like I look, I was like, oh, I love Lana Del Rey because of the world she builds, and it's also how I just move through life. It's like I just create these fantasies in my head. It's like the whole meme where it's like, oh, you create your little fantasy story before going to sleep. I was like, that's
Literally,
just me.
That's how. No, same way as a lot. Yeah.
And it made it easier working, especially on like a full-length project, to like with Breezy, I decided this takes place in a specific world. I had a mood board. A lot of it really came down to this one picture, which was a painting. I don't remember who the painting was, but it was based off of the Peter Pan Disney movie. But it was like a specific painting of the mermaids in this like oasis type world. And that's, if I had to pick one image, that was what I had in my mind when I was working on that project. And for that one specifically, I wanted to make it all feel like it was in this place. And then for Pure Imagination, my last album, it wasn't as, I didn't really see a place in my mind, but that was more like a person or an idea of a person. But yes, I like to create some sort of through line.
Sort of coming into your own as like an artist, really. Like, I mean, because like you said, you had the first project that was like, let me build this world around it, and then yeah, like 2 years, like, because Pure Imagination was earlier this year, right?
Yeah.
So I sort of see it as like, yeah, okay, now I sort of know the world that I want to create, and now I kind of want to just like inhabit it a little more. And all right, well, I got a lot of more questions about the album and stuff, but that's enough talking for right now. So let's get back to the music, folks, and give it up, everyone. Moist Breezy again. Woo!
down your guard. I'll be your planet pleasure.
what's your name? If I done said it 1,000,000 times, you slip further and further. I fall deeper into my mind. Imaginary lover, I've never really real one time. Sensual undercover. If I could, I would testify. The coldest metal hit me like a switch, electrified. Now we had something special. You were once in a lifetime. You were once in a lifetime. You're my favorite mistake. You're the only one that I adore. Cater to all my tastes. Unlike anyone I've had before, keep you close like a secret. Love so good I could tell the world. Imaginary lover, ephemerally real one time. Sensual undercover. If I could, I would testify. The coldest metal hit me like a switch, electrified. Thought we had something special. You were once in a lifetime. You were once in a lifetime. Imaginary lover, ephemeral. Had you for one night, sensual undercover. If I could, I would testify. Imaginary lover, ephemeral. Had you for one night, sensual undercover. If I could, I would testify. I remember I could be out of my mind. Remember I had you once in my life. Remember your touch electrified. Remember, remember you were once in a lifetime. You were once in a lifetime. You were once in a lifetime. You were once in a lifetime.
All right, one more time. Moistbreezy, everyone. Woo! Just this really quick. All right. So I wanted to talk. I mean, we were getting into it before, and so I wanted to talk more about your production process because I was reading, some of the stuff that you said in interviews past, and I thought it was very interesting how you talked about how you really work simultaneously on making your own beats and doing the vocals, and you seem sort of overall a very do it all yourself artist. So I wanted to ask, was that intentional, or what is it like to work as collaborating with other people to bring your own project versus doing it all yourself? Did you, when you started working on this, were you sort of okay, I need to be able to do everything myself to bring what I want to life? Or talk about how that kind of approach came together.
Yeah, well, it started out of necessity.
Obviously.
When I started, I was learning how to produce because, as I said, the story of my friend was getting me to do vocals for him. In the process of me writing vocals for his beats, I just started writing music myself, and I was just really into just music in general. I was really into dance music too. I was really in the dance music world. So I wanted to learn how to produce, and especially in the dance music world, when I started, I had that more in mind, like DJ type stuff, versus pop music. To me, I think being a woman in the dance music world was really important to produce myself. And then as I started producing, I realized I liked making pop music. I started using my own vocals to make myself stand out. But as I started making music, working on music more, that's when I was like, oh, I really want to make pop music. But at this point, like I was so used to doing everything myself, and a part of it's like a budget thing. Is like I'd rather save money and mix and master myself. But some of it also is like the longer I do things myself, the more it's just a part of my process. Like mixing is a part of producing for me, so that's something that'd be really hard to give away to someone else. And there were times like I tried working with other people for mastering, and I was like, oh, I can pretty much do this myself. So for some of it, it's like keeping the creative process under control. But I really see myself more as a producer than a singer, which is something I think people don't necessarily know from observing me. I think they assume if someone's a pop artist that they're a singer
They're
first.
a performer. They're like a pop diva. Like,
So producing is very important. Like producing myself is a really important part of my process. But yeah, and I did for Breezy. I did all the visuals myself too. That was, being in the pandemic, stuck inside, kind of forced me to do that in a way. Yeah. But I think it allowed me to like tap into a part of my creativity I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. But yeah, for my last album, I wanted to work with collaborators on the visual side. For me, I think the start of the project where I'm writing and producing, and because I write and produce at the same time, it's really important for that to come from myself and be a part of my own process. And then once like the album's made, I'm creating visuals, it's easier for me to bring in collaborators there then when it's like, oh, I have everything.
Everything's already there. It's now just like how to bring it to life and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely the same way. I mean, when I started making clothes, it was like, okay, I just have to do everything myself because I don't have the money for it. But even as it's gotten bigger, I'm like, it's so hard for me to delegate stuff when it's like so fully my idea. I mean, like, obviously people were in bands, they, make collaborative effort, but like for my art, it's like so much just my own thing that it's very hard for me to just be like, oh yeah, and you can work on like the flyers or you can work on this thing. I'm just like, no, I need to fucking do it all myself. But yeah, I mean, so that was the other thing that I was really struck by when you were talking about your production process, because you said you don't really make beats and then put in vocals or like write verses and then put in beats. You said it's really simultaneous for you. Like you'll be working on on breaks and snares and everything, blah blah blah, like as you're, and then saying, oh well, this vocal kind of goes, which is super interesting. I mean, was that just sort of a way that you developed when you were teaching yourself how to make music and whatnot? Because you said you spent like years learning, or I mean, talk about that process, because it's definitely very interesting compared to how a lot of other artists operate.
Yeah, I think that's how it developed as I was learning how to produce. Like I can't even remember when I first started thinking like, oh, let me start singing over my own beats. But yeah, as I was learning my process, I think when I hit something that I liked production-wise, so I'll start with the production, and then I'll start, like a melody will come to me, I'll start singing over it. And so that's kind of how it goes hand in hand, because once I have some chords down or some beat, it's usually some melody comes, and that's when I have an idea of what I want the song to be in terms of the vocals and lyrics, then I can flesh it out even production-wise. So what I do is I have a notes app, and just anytime something comes across my mind, I'll like write it down in my notes app. That could be a potential lyric. And so this will just be like, I could be on the subway, I could be out, I could be listening to another song. So I just like collect all this, so when I actually sit down to start producing, and a melody starts coming to me, I can just scroll through and see, oh, what of these fits, and then I'll flesh out the song from there. And also if I'm working on a full-length project, I'll have a theme or a concept for the whole project. So that also, it helps with that. It's like, oh, I have the theme, then I'll go and say, what type of beat do I want to start messing around with? And once I have the basis of the beat, usually a melody comes to me. Yeah. So if something doesn't come to me in the process, I usually just ditch it. I don't really even like make a full beat. Force
a way to like, no, I need to make this work. Like, it's just very natural. Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, because I'm like you, I mean, I'm someone who like with each clothing collection, like I love to have like a full narrative and story and whatnot. So yeah, I like a lot of future seasons come together for me is I'll like have an idea, like, or literally just something like I thought of when I'm on the subway, and I'll be like, oh, that could be kind of cool. Let me explore that, and then I'll like, well, that doesn't really fit with what I'm doing now. So I think the last 3 seasons I've done have come from ideas I've had where I was making the current season and was like, well, this doesn't work for this, but I want to save it for a future. Like my 4th collection was on like love and emotions and whatnot, and I kept like coming back to like wanting to use like Catholic imagery in it, and I was like, I should just do a whole like collection on that, which is what happened with season 5. So yeah, I think it's sort of like very interesting, like mixing and matching where the inspiration comes to you and kind of building it all at once. So yeah, so while we're on the topic of how your music is made, talk a little bit about Pure Imagination, which is your album that was released earlier this year. You said it was the 2nd project you done. You did Breezy in 2020. This was a more, I guess fully fleshed out thing. But yeah, so talk a little bit about that, how the process came together. What did you set out to do with that? Was it like different than how you approached Breezy? Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Breezy I called it a mixtape, partly to to make it not so stressful for myself doing my first full-length project. And then Pure Imagination, as I was working on, I was like, this is my first album.
Your debut.
Like my quote-unquote debut album. But I came up with the concept of this, I think it was beginning of 2021. I was watching Hunter Schafer's special episode of Euphoria, the Jules episode, and there's a part where she's like, "Oh, it's the best sex I've ever had because it was all pure fucking imagination." I think when I was remembering it, I thought she was talking about the relationship, and I like went back to watch it, and I was like, "That was the actual quote." I related to the concept of something like a relationship being so good because it's all in your head. Yeah. And that was like the start of the idea. I also knew I wanted to do something really trancey. I think the original concept is I wanted to do something that was pure trance. But as I was working on this project, I leaned more into including other dance sounds from the late 90s and early 2000s, so it wasn't strictly dance. But this one was also, I took a lot of inspiration from what was happening in my personal life as well. A lot of stuff that was like, this makes me feel crazy. But as my friend pointed out, I was like, well, you created a narrative. You might as well do something with it. So yeah, I turned it into an album.
Hell yeah. How does it mean? Because you're someone, as we've talked about, that like it's very much the projects are their own world, their own narrative. How do you sort of approach it when you have an idea that doesn't really quite fit in what you're doing? I mean, do you try to kind of like conform it to? Because like you were just saying how like you wanted to do all trance, and then kind of was like, no, I want to do more poppy beats, whatnot. So yeah, how do you sort of approach that when you like are set out to do something, as you obviously do with your projects, and then like you kind of start to work on something that you like but might not really fit with it? Do you sort of try to conform it, or you're sort of like, oh well, this can kind of change what the project is? Like, yeah, how do you approach that kind of?
So I think like with this, I didn't have like a strict, at the very beginning, like a strict, this is what it should be. I had these ideas, and as I worked on it, it helped develop where it went. Yeah, like there was a moment where I was like, oh, I want to do a pure trance project. And as I started working on it, I was like, oh, I actually want to do stuff that's more Eurodance too, and maybe one that's a bit more house. And at some point, I started seeing like, this is kind of like those dance compilation CDs that they put out, like, and now that's what I call music. Or I was really pulling from a lot of big songs from that era, like dance pop or dance songs, as inspiration. And there are some songs that I can be like, oh, this is my Waiting for Tonight by Jennifer Lopez. This is my Cher, Believe.
Because I mean, especially like to talk about genre specifically, I mean, like the Eurodance and everything, that is such an interesting like genre because it's so much of like when cultures and styles like clash really quickly. Like, how do they all? I mean, I remember when, not to fucking bring it up, but the goddamn what was the meme? The fucking Eurodance meme thing again? Planet of the Bass, yeah. I don't think that guy's very funny, but when that meme was blowing up, I mean, they were saying it's like the Eurodance style from the 90s is such a funny mashup of cultures because it was like post-Cold War that all of a sudden like Eastern Europe just got exposed to like Western culture, but like it was all MTV and like Michael Jackson and dance. And so it was just like this massive like, yeah, confluence of sounds and whatnot that produced like really fucking like good and interesting styles. So yeah, it is like sort of funny like to come back to when you're working on stuff and you're like, I actually, you know, want to come back to this like genre that is such like a mashup of so many different sounds and whatnot. But all right, so let's get back to the music right now because we've talked far enough for right now. And yeah, once again, Moist Breezy, take it away. Woo!
You and me, you and me, you every night. You and me, you and me, you every night. Every night. You and me, you and me, you every night. Every night. Every night I close my eyes to get to you. Lucid imaginings in astral rendezvous. Every night then I'd go out on my own. I recognized you by that smile I made my home. Kiss me in the pool, kiss me in your car, kiss me on the beach, kiss me after dark. Kiss me in the pool, kiss me in your car, kiss me on the beach, kiss me after dark. Every night I hope to see you in my dreams. When I'm meant to feel like a future memory. Every night I hold you in my fantasies. There's one thing I'm sure of, that you were meant for me. You and me, you and me, you every night. Every night. You and me, you and me, you every night. Every night. Every night I memorize your baby blues. Now that I have you, I can see the multitudes. The desert's red, the ocean's hue. Every lifetime past, I've lived with you. Transcending past the latitudes to see myself from your point of view. Kiss me in the pool, kiss me in your car, kiss me on the beach, kiss me after dark. Kiss me in the pool, kiss me in your car, kiss me on the beach, kiss me after dark. Every night I hope to see you in my dreams. When I'm meant to feel like a future memory. Every night I hold you in my fantasies. There's one thing I'm sure of, that you were meant for me. You and me, you and me, you every night. Every night. You and me, you and me, you every night. Every night. And I'm waiting for you, come running back to me. So I'm reaching for you in my fantasies. Every night I hope to see you in my dreams. When I'm meant
telekinetic. You melt me with your mind. Electromagnetic. Your body next to mine. I can forget it. You touch your lips, my thighs. So baby, let's get it. You could just hit my line.
We've got unfinished business, baby, we could make a deal. The way our sparks would fly, our chemistry was hyper real. Let's have a private party, take you to my penthouse suite. I'll show you all my love and you're my only VIP. If I had your number. 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 If I had your number, tell me how to reach it. Tell me how to reach it now. Say I'm trying to meet you. Say I'm trying to meet you now. Tell me how to reach it. Tell me how to reach it now. Say I'm trying to meet you. Say I'm trying to meet you now. Let me see your number all up on my phone. Hit me up, I'm begging you. Let's start the show. Making up for these long nights I spent on my own. If I had your number.
All right, once again, Moist Breezy, everyone. Woo! All right, so we are gonna finish this up in a little bit. I got a few more questions, and then Moist Breezy is gonna do one or two more songs, and then we are done. So yeah, I wanted to talk because we've had a bunch of different artists, different genres on the show, and I like to do a sort of state of the genre talk with them. So I mean, last time we had Savoya on his rock band, and we were sort of talking about what does it mean to be a rock and roll band in 2023 when like live music live like instruments are making like a real big comeback, and you have bands like the 1975 that are huge, but not necessarily like rock bands. So obviously it's a massive question, but yeah, like what do you sort of see pop music being in 2023, and where do you sort of see it going? I mean, you were talking about how you really want to be seen as like a producer, not necessarily like a pop diva, whatnot. So yeah, I mean, just like with all of your like different styles that you sort of bring together, where do you sort of see like the state of pop music right now? Because there is definitely like, a big in the last like couple years with like just dance music and like sort of neo disco and whatnot, come back with like Charlie XCX, Dua Lipa and whatnot. But yeah, just sort of what if you wanted to give your thoughts on the genre in general.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to go off of here. I mean, part of it is I do love pop music, but like certain types of pop music, and I think that's kind of important for what perspective I have. Is that to me, pop isn't so much its own genre, more so that it takes from other genres and packages in a way that makes it more accessible for the masses. And I really like pop best when it takes something else and presents it in a way that's more theatrical or more this or that. Like Madonna and Lady Gaga, for example, is like I can always go back and dig through like a Madonna album because you can tell she's working with whatever hot producer was happening at the time and making it her own. And she would always have some really weird track too on her albums, like on Confessions on a Dance Floor. It's the I Love New York track, where when you first listen to it, you're like, who would write a song like this, or is like calling people who don't like New York a dork? Or recently I got into like MDNA, and the second song on that album is Gang Bang, and she's just talking about shooting someone. Like, it's very camp. Like that song, it's like feels like a movie character. Yeah, for me, like I think pop is most interesting when it's tapping into something else rather than pure, like quote unquote pure pop, because I don't
Yeah.
really know like what that is. I think even when you're doing pure pop, it's referencing something else.
Yeah, I
Usually
mean-
the 80s.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely is of all the genres like the least actual like a genre because it does encompass so much. And that was what we were talking about last week with Savoya with like, yeah, what does rock and roll mean anymore? Like, is there even like a rock genre left, or is it really just sort of like the trappings of like what does like, you know, the rock and roll aesthetics and whatnot? Like people talk about rappers being the new rock stars, and all that means is that they just give crazy live performances. So yeah, I mean, I think that is sort of like interesting to talk about with pop because yeah, you've seen. You see with like a lot of pop stars, Madonna being the most obvious one, where yeah, you can really see like what sort of like subculture or like niche genre she's referencing and sort of repackaging for a wider audience. Which, you know, I think that people can get mad at that idea that it's like, you know, appropriating or whatnot, but I think it's true. I think like the optimistic way to look at that is it's like, yeah, you are repackaging something for a more like accessible and like mass produced, not mass produced in a bad way, but just in a way that more people can see it and understand it. And I think that, you know, interesting stuff with genres happens when you bring together different kind of styles and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously like a big question, but yeah, I mean, do you sort of with pop music, I mean, definitely the last few years, like, yeah, there's been a lot of neo disco and whatnot, a lot of like reggaeton and like, you know, Caribbean influences. Yeah, I mean, what as you work on music and whatnot, do you sort of try to, I don't know, draw? I mean, obviously, you talk about drawing on artists that you like loved growing up and whatnot, but yeah, how do you sort of balance like drawing on the past versus like trying to create a new sound, if that's even what you're trying to do? Right.
Yeah, so for me, like coming up as a producer, I did come up from the electronic world, and in the electronic world, I think people are really obsessed with the idea of creating a new sound. Particularly when I started producing, that was when Sophie was getting popular, and we know like Sophie became popular for the way she would manipulate sound, which I think is great for like certain artists if you're into sound design. But I think getting caught up in trying to create something totally new can be.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we all need to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's like for me, like liberating myself from the idea of, oh, I need to create a new sound. So I think for me, when I go and I pull from things that I enjoyed when I was younger, for example, like I'm not necessarily trying to do a direct recreation. Like I'll hear things I like and I would try to interpret it in a way that makes sense to me. And some of it's also like allowing myself to not know the full history or knowledge of something where like I have some producer friends where you play a song, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's a gated 80s snare. They can name you every sound. But for me, like not knowing all of that, I think allows me to create something new by accident.
Yeah, like your own take on it, really, like without knowing the whole background. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily make you uninformed, but it's like just sort of bringing your own perspective to something rather than like, oh, I know the exact history of this and I can recreate it like perfectly. It's like, all right, well, that's not really like interesting necessarily. Not to say that like, yeah, music can't be good if it isn't just like a rehash something, but yeah, it is like a sort of way to have your own take on something just by virtue of like bringing your own perspective to it. Yeah, which is super interesting. I mean, and yeah, I think, you know, what we were sort of talking about earlier with pop music, I mean, I think the last 10 years or so, I mean, and this is sort of an overstatement because obviously you've had like Madonna, like Michael Jackson, people who have been acclaimed artists for decades. But the last 10 years, there really was a big shift towards poptimism and like, you know, the idea that like pop mainstream music can be critically acclaimed. We can, you know, discuss artists like Beyonce, like Ariana Grande, like Lady Gaga, like on the level as like any, you know, of the most critically acclaimed artists. And then it's not just like vapid pop or whatnot, which I think was sort of what like early 2000s was sort of like derogatorily like referred to, which is funny because at the same time, like as you know, we're talking about like Eurodance and stuff coming back, so much of like that era that was sort of written off as like like, you know, brainless, like mindless pop is like kind of had a reevaluation. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't even really have a follow-up question to that. I mean, I think they made a lot of interesting points, but yeah, I mean, like, where do you sort of see like the future of mainstream pop music going? I mean, do you think it's just going to be more of this like kind of sampling sounds and, you know, seeing where it goes? And yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot there that I
Yeah.
could touch on because I feel like poptimism is kind of the approach I have to pop music myself. Because pop isn't easy to make.
Yeah.
Like for it being so quote unquote vapid is actually the most difficult genre to pull off well, like to actually make a pop song that resonates with people and is timeless. But on the other hand, too, I think people have some like preconceived notions that for something to be worth being critically acclaimed, it has to be like dark or about serious topics. I think Bjork has like been interviewed where she talked about how there was something about once she started singing about heartbreak, she got taken more seriously. Like there's all these preconceived notions we have, and I think for me, writing pop music, I like using styles and even just like the way a Eurodance song would be so simplistic in its lyrics, but using that to tell a story, using that as a tool. On the other hand, in terms of where pop music is today, a lot of the major label stuff is really reductive right now. It's like every other tweet I see is like, why is every song an interpolation of a song from the 2000s? Where I know there are articles that are going into how there's a cash grab with publishers where they can make twice the money if they sample a song from their catalog. But at the same time, I think there has been this new wave of artists making pop music as a genre. A lot of independent artists in particular coming up. And that's kind of this is a whole other discussion of like hyper pop coming about, where it was kind of pop done in a subculture way, and it evolved in many different directions. The term means different things to different people. But yeah, in terms of, I think we're in a strange place with pop right now, because I think what it's going to look like in the future is going to be really different than what we've had in the past. Just culturally, things have shifted with the way technology has developed. So like in the 90s, you could have someone like Britney Spears because it wasn't easy to get someone out to everyone. But now anyone could make a song that is well produced, and you could make a TikTok to it and it could go viral. By the same time, like, you might not have longevity as an artist. So I think the way that we're going to consume and produce what is that type of pop star is going to look differently, and it's probably going to be someone doing something we cannot expect that will kind of pave the way for what it looks like in the future. But right now I think there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of room for experimentation to happen in that sense.
And we'd be here for another 2 hours if we wanted to, delve into that. I mean, there's a whole other thing with how has like TikTok changed approaches to music making, how is streaming, whatever. We'll have you back at some other time. We can get more into that. But all right, so as we wrap up here, what is the future like for Moistbreezy? I know you have a show coming up soon, but yeah, what do you want to plug, and what's the future hold?
So this week I'm performing live at Elsewhere this Thursday. I'm opening for Zand for their Sewer Star tour. I think doors are at 6.
Oh yeah.
And then on Friday, I throw a party with my friends called Hula Hoop, which is all about euphoric dance, Eurodance, trance, all those vibes. And we are have our next party this Friday at Mood Ring at 10. So definitely come through to those.
All right. Well, let's hear one more song, and then we will be out of here, everyone. One last time. Moistbreezy, everyone. Woo!
ya to make the move. We could turn this night into a special occasion. If you read my mind, it's like deja vu. If I'm not going home tonight, I'll be with the one who treats me right. I've been dropping all these clues, so why can't it be you? Why can't it be you? Forget, stuck in your head. Let's end this night with no regrets. So make that move, you got nothing to lose. Let's rendezvous, show me what you can do. Hard to forget, stuck in your head. Let's end this night with no regrets. So make that move, you got nothing to lose. There's no excuse, why can't it be you? 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 Why can't it be you?
All right, that is Moistbreezy on the Artist Series, everyone. Thank you, Xpizza. Thank you, Moistbreezy. Thank you, Valley and Ryan. And we'll see you sometime soon. Bye-bye. Love you. Mwah.